item number 6, the Fair Credit Reporting Bill, that the discussion of this bill and debate on this bill be suspended. But I would note that the bill was circulated to honorable senators on Thursday the 2nd of December.
The question is that further consideration of this bill be postponed. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Witness the ayes have it.
Order number one, sir.
Order number 1.
Order number one, in the name of the most honorable Senator, Mr. Dr. J. H. Walker, to move passing of a resolution to approve in accordance with Section 5 of the Land Acquisition Act, Chapter 228, the compulsory acquisition by the Crown of the parcel of land situated at Workman's in the parish of St. George in this island for the purpose of constructing recreational facilities for public use.
Senator Walker.
Mr. President, a fairly simple and straightforward resolution. You know of the government's commitment to providing proper recreational facilities in all communities across Barbados. And this resolution seeks permission for the compulsory acquisition of 1,992.9 square meters of land at Workman's for the provision of recreational facilities. I should say that in addition to, it is felt that this will not only in terms of the community, for the use of the communities of Upper and Lower Workman's, Jericho, Jordan, and Orange Estate, but it would also be felt that it would provide a very important recreational space for use by the students of the nearby Workman's Primary School. And so the Honorable Chamber is basically asked to approve this resolution so that government can provide these much needed recreational facilities at Workman's St. George. I beg to move that this resolution do not pass.
Senator Franklin.
Mr. President, I don't usually speak on these resolutions, but there's only one thing I'm concerned about, is that hopefully that the people who own the land will be paid, because we have something that's in the works, and I know even my grandmother, before I was born, they took some land from her, and to this day they haven't paid her. So I'm concerned about that, but I wouldn't want to get into my friend's way, the honourable member for St. George South. And I wouldn't want to get in his way. I wouldn't try to put a stumbling block in his way. So I too would support that resolution. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Franklin. Is on the Senator Greenwich.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise to make a 2-minute contribution to the debate. And I do so, sir, first of all, in my old-time capacity as a former Minister of Sports. And sports has always been an integral part of my life. And I love to see these sporting facilities go up in the respective districts throughout Barbados. Indeed, sir, I do recall when I was Minister of Sports, and when I did one of these, I used to feel so very proud. And there came a time when we actually did not only the sporting facility, not only the land, but we also did pavilions as well throughout Barbados. And if you look through Barbados, you'll see so many of those pavilions marked opened by the Honorable Rudolph Greenwich, whoever he was. And, sir, I know that there are pavilions in St. Philip, like Races and Brayton and so on, that we feel very proud of them. And they've done those districts remarkably well. Also, throughout Christchurch, we have places like Inchmarlow and so on, which would have been open, and which the people always thanked us for. But when it came to St. George, I had to say that if there was one person I always had on my back, and I had to be always, no, not another, no, man, stop it, it was the Honorable Sir Louis Tull. He was always asking for a sporting facility in St. George. And he put a lot of pressure on whoever the Minister of Sports was at the time. And if you look through St. George, you will see pavilions such as Ellerton and Bide Mill and so on, which Mr. Tull put so much pressure on us, because he always thought that they did so much for the respective districts. And I tend to think that parliamentarians today do virtually the same thing. They want to see this type of thing in their constituency. It is always a feather in their cap when something like this happens. And it is one of the things I do believe that whenever they are ready, they will put that on their resume, the resume of their achievements. And even though, yes, they might have got a job here and there for someone, that one of the things that really comes to the top of that resume is the fact that they have been able to put a sporting facility, recreational facility in the constituency. I am happy too to see, sir, that our government continues to see and to ensure that community development remains an indispensable part of their commitment. And these things, as I said, they do so much for the profile of the district, an indispensable part of community development. Now, sir, just by way of comparison, I went to the Freedom Village in St. Michael, Bridgetown. And honestly, sir, I did not know that that Freedom Village had really and truly looked as immaculate as it did. I was so pleasantly surprised. I had heard, and I hadn't gone before these independence celebrations came about. And when I saw, it gave you the wow, because that has done an amazing job for the profile of Bridgetown. And I hope and pray that we guard it, we safeguard it, and we do not let ever it go to ruin. And we do not encourage or do things that would encourage the paroles and so on to do harm to that Freedom Village. It has done wonders for the profile of Bridgetown. And I do believe that it can be a kind of attraction, tourist attraction even, for Barbados. And the same thing, the point I'm making though, is that the same thing that has done for the city, the same thing that some of these sporting facilities do for the constituencies. They go hand in hand with that greening and that creation of recreational parks that Minister Ford has become so well known for. These things do improve the aesthetics of the constituencies. I agree with Senator Franklin what he said just now, which is that the acquisition for these, especially for sporting facilities, I go down that road, the sporting facilities road, that they should be paid. I was reading only 3 or so days ago of a gentleman who owned a vast piece of land that was acquired for the construction of a pavilion, the Courtney Brown Luther King pavilion. 2 gentlemen that I know very well, Luther King and Courtney Brown. And the pavilion is there, it's being used and so on. And for 32 years, that particular landowner has not been paid. Let me say that I do not care which party was in government or how many times they were in government. Suppose the Barbados Labour Party, of which I'm a member, was there for all the years. I don't care which party was there. That is totally unacceptable. Totally unacceptable. That you can have a situation there where you acquire somebody's land for 30-something years and up to now the person hasn't been paid. Totally unacceptable. BLP, DLP, I don't care who it is. And I think that when you come to pay someone like that for property that you have taken to provide recreational facilities, that, by now, I think that that particular man, even if nobody else, I don't think you should even be paying him in bonds any longer for the amount of time that he's had to wait, that he should be paid in cash. I do believe that, sir. So, I think my 2 minutes are up. And they're not up yet? Mr. President, I have no problem whatsoever in supporting the resolution.
Thank you very much, Senator Greenwich. Senator Dr. Rogers.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I rise just to speak for 1 minute, not to go past the 2 that the previous speaker used. But in as much as this particular resolution involves the civil parish over which I have ecclesiastical oversight, I want to rise to support this resolution. I rise to support this resolution for the establishment of a recreational facility in Workman St. George. I believe that we can all concur that the provision of space and safe space for our children to play and to grow and to interact is important for us. And so I commend this particular resolution. But what I also wish to put to the government and those in authority, if we can kind of diversify into the types of sporting facilities that we have on the island to provide greater scope for the development of other sports other than the traditional basketball and the volleyball and so on that we have. I think we have a lot of young people, for example, something like a cycling rink where they can develop their skills and perhaps rise on the world stage in something like the X Games, things that are not traditional. But a lot of our young people have the varied skills for these things. So while I support this, I will hope that going forward we can look at diversifying the types of facilities we offer. I think that I don't know if I should say it here or not, as a former cricket captain of that great institution in St. John, and also having captained the university team, yes, I used to be an avid sports person back in the day, several pounds ago.
Senator Rogers, may I inquire, are you available for the West Indies team?
I think they'll have to have another team for me to make, because that one would have been, anyway, I would have been
Below your
above the,
standards.
sorry. We're going through the doldrums now in cricket, and it is not inspiring to young people to follow that sport at this point in time. But I do believe that we will still be holding on to our traditional cricket and so on, football, but there are some areas that other young people will be interested in. And if we can kind of diversify, just to give them the space. I remember there was a time when roller skating was big in Barbados. You actually had lots of hockey games being played on roller skates. You don't see anything like that anymore. And perhaps we can look at those other areas as we develop these sporting facilities in different parts of the island. They don't have to be one size fits all. They don't have to be the same thing everywhere. But we can provide areas. We're a small country, so we can't do it all in the same place. So if we can provide other opportunities for other sports to develop, especially amongst the ordinary people in our villages and so on, let's not fool ourselves that there are opportunities open to some people in this country and some children in this country that others will never see. And perhaps as the government, we can look at how we can provide the avenue for children who are less fortunate to have access to certain sporting activities that they wouldn't normally have access to. So while I support this bill, I also hope that in the future we can look at broadening the scope of activities offered in these areas. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Rogers. Senator Walkup.
President, I want to thank honorable members for their support, and I beg to move that this resolution do not pass.
The question is that this resolution do not pass. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This resolution stands pass.
Order number 4, sir.
Order number 4.
Order number 4, in the name of the Honorable Leader of the Senate, to move the passing of a resolution to approve in accordance with Section 5 of the Land Acquisition Act, Chapter 228, the compulsory acquisition by the Crown of parcel of land at Sergeant's Village in the parish of Christchurch in this island for the public purpose, namely housing development.
Thank you, Mr. President. This resolution seeks approval for the compulsory acquisition of 2 parcels of land at Sergeant's Village, one parcel containing 1,222.2 square meters, and the other 5,798.8 square meters. Mr. President, I think we're all aware that the Ministry of Housing and Lands and Maintenance has created and continues to create many housing solutions across Barbados, and this is just to be part of that. We have built houses thus far since coming to office in Todds, Carpenter's Glade, Sterling, and Rice's in St. Philip, Farmers in St. Thomas, and indeed in Lower Burney and Lead and Nightingale Road, St. Michael. There are also houses being constructed at the city, at Arlene's Court, at Lancaster, in St. James, and in addition, also we're seeing preparations at Coverley, in Chancery Lane, and also in Colleton, St. Lucie, and soon in Poolland, St. John. So obviously the process is started. We've had some setbacks as it relates to the COVID-19 lockdown, the volcanic ash, and indeed Hurricane Elsa, where we are now trying to accommodate and rebuild houses for over 500 persons whose homes were destroyed in that hurricane. But we are still pressing ahead. As it relates to these lands that we're speaking about in the resolution, it is a housing area, and it is felt that the 2 parcels are suitable for the construction of low-income houses. And indeed, the ministry is thinking of looking at about 4 or 5 quads that would be able to accommodate roughly 20 families. The land tax records show that the site value of the land owned, the value of the land measured 1,222 square meters is 26,400. And the other parcel, the larger parcel, is valued at 426,900. It has an old house on it with an improved value of 450,000. The Attorney General has certified the resolution, the compulsory acquisition of these 2 parcels of land, and the resolution is before us. I mentioned the value, and I switched there in reference to a comment that was made earlier by my colleague from the other side in reference to payment. It is anticipated that these funds will be paid as soon as possible. And we know that the issue with payment has to do with those discussions and settlements that occurred prior to the 30th of September 2018. I'm obliged to you, Mr. President. I beg to move that this resolution do now pass.
Thank you very much, Senator Walcott. The speakers on this resolution? The question is that this resolution do not pass. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This resolution is now passed.
Order number 5, sir.
Order number 5.
Order number 5, in the name of the Honorable Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Facilitation of International Maritime Traffic Bill 2021.
Senator Cummings.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I rise on this occasion to introduce the second reading of the Facilitation of International Maritime Traffic Bill and to guide the honorable members of this chamber through that body of legislation, give some context to the legislation and what it hopes to accomplish. Now, Mr. President, in 2018, when this administration took office, there was an audit of our maritime systems by the International Maritime Organization. There were over 27 areas, I believe, where Barbados was not at the time compliant. And since then, in the intervening period, under the leadership of the Ministry of Maritime Affairs and the Honorable Kirk Humphrey, who leads that ministry, and all of the various agencies that fall under that ministry, there has been a considerable push for those items to be addressed and for Barbados to be compliant with the International Maritime Organization's requirements for a maritime state and a port state in this instance, Mr. President. This item of this body of legislation, which is a substantial body of legislation, the facilitation of maritime traffic, is a part of that overall process, Mr. President. It aims to address, in the first instance, the requirements under the Convention on the Facilitation of International Maritime Traffic of 1965 and the associated amendments. For short, going forward, Mr. President, I will be referring to it as the FAL. Barbados is a party but needed to meet the requirements, as I mentioned earlier, and under the legislation there are two elements that are going to be outlined in the course of this presentation. One, the requirements of the convention itself, and two, the mechanism by which the convention is being implemented, which would include the implementation of a maritime single window, which would facilitate the ease of doing business for ships, clearances, cargo, and also cruise ships, Mr. President. Now, this maritime single window in the first instance, Mr. President, is meant to be an electronic portal through which ships will submit their advanced information. And we know, of course, there's advanced cargo information systems, there are advanced passenger information systems, APIS and ACIS. They are all coordinated with our respective customs and immigration officials and the regional agency, which would be, in this instance, JRCC. And they work very closely with all of our agencies. And so in this instance, this is also meant to be done. Mr. President, I want to spend a moment speaking about the overall ecosystem within which this file will then incorporate other elements of the transformation process of the port ecosystem. Now, the maritime single window will provide the clearance systems for ships who are coming into Barbados or leaving from Barbados through the Bridgetown port, but equally so, it will sit among a community of other single windows which treat to a range of issues at the port. One of those under the leadership of the Ministry of Commerce is the electronic single window, which is now underway as part of the development process in partnership with UNCTAD, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. That is specific to cargo, and it is part of the trade facilitation agreement under the World Trade Organization, and not the UN WTO, the World Trade Organization, the TFA. that is there. You also have the port community system, which is also under development by the Bridgetown Port and that related team with support from the Caribbean Development Bank and private partners. We also, in addition to that, Mr. President, have seen the introduction in 2019 of September of the Asikuda World System in partnership with UNCTAD, which then captured documentation for the clearance of goods through the Bridgetown Port, both through bulk cargo and containerized cargo being submitted in advance through these systems. Now, Mr. President, why do we have all of these systems, Mr. President? Because when people think of the port, they think of the physical infrastructure called the port, but there are multiple players who function within that ecosystem. You have port health, you have agriculture, you have veterinary services, you have customs, you have the port itself for the facilitation of ships, you have your various security agencies, of course, and so all of those things have to go together to ensure that documents are submitted, reviewed, approved or not approved, sent for secondary inspection, and that clearances can take place. In the middle of that, Mr. President, you need to have also a mechanism that allows for just-in-time clearances, which means that a ship does not sail from one jurisdiction to Barbados in just under 24 hours unless you're coming from neighboring St. Vincent, as is the case with our vegetable produce that may come in on 2 days a week. But we know that a ship is coming well in advance, and that allows for the submission in advance of the relevant documentation to allow for clearances of that documentation to take place. Now, this is important because we spend a lot of time both in this place and in the other place talking about doing business. And one of the metrics under the doing business indicators is the speed of clearing documents and documentary clearance processes. And so this is a critical component, Mr. President, in ensuring that we can speed up the clearance of ships and their associated cargo or passengers. It will allow, therefore, for us to have greater levels of coordination between ships and ports, to ensure that there's greater ecosystem thinking within the port community, and of course to ensure that there is a standard that is applicable across the port. Now, if I can get into the specifics of the actual bill, Mr. President, just so everyone is following, we have, of course, the overview of the bill, which is outlined. Then we have the overall National Maritime Transport Facilitation Program that is captured at Article 5 of the legislation, and it also sets up an administrative mechanism at Article 6 where there is a National Maritime Transportation Facilitation Committee. Now, that committee is chaired by the Bridgetown Port at the level of the CEO. It reports into all of the various agencies to whom I made reference earlier, and it advises the minister on the overall maritime program. This is further established, Mr. President, in great detail at the first schedule to the bill. Then you have the specific functions which are required of the port, sitting as the chair of that committee. That is captured in Article 8, Mr. President, and it outlines their responsibilities for both establishing and maintaining and reviewing and monitoring the mechanisms to ensure that the processes are simplified. Now, I want to take a moment, Mr. President, to celebrate publicly the team that built the single window for the maritime single window. They are a homegrown team from within the Bridgetown Port, within their IT division, that built this entire maritime single window internal. They did not subcontract it out to a third party. They did not bring in an international partner to build it, Mr. President, but they built it within the Bridgetown Port, and I would wish to congratulate them for their commitment to innovation, and technological development, and of course their commitment to go always above and beyond the call of duty. The establishment of a maritime single window also, Mr. President, is covered in detail at Part 3 of the bill, Article 9 specifically, and it goes through in some detail what actually is meant to be incorporated in the establishment of the bill, and then it goes on at Articles 10 through 23 on the specific, to speak about the documents which need to be submitted. Now, I'll spend a moment just to talk about that documentation, because when Barbados implemented the Asikuda World System, everyone remembers that there were any number of challenges with the implementation of that system. And that is always meant to be the case when there is something that is new. What many people did not know was that because we had been doing things for such a long time in a set way, that change became even more difficult, and that almost 90% of the errors and 90% of the issues that were encountered were as a result of input errors or the failure to have documentary compliance. So it is important that there is this kind of training and developmental lead time that allows people to make the transition far more seamlessly than they would have if they did not necessarily have an immersion in what that transition looks like and what that process looks like. Now, in terms of the documents, we have the specifics for cargo captured at Articles 10 to 23, and then the specifics of the documents submitted at Articles 24 to 33 of the document. And this is outlined also in the third schedule of the bill. Now, as it relates to cruise ships, I want to take a moment just to share a little bit on what kind of documentary compliance cruise ships are being held to. Mr. President, many people may see a cruise ship docking in port, in the Bridgetown port now. Over the course of the weekend, on Saturday, for example, I myself, Minister Humphrey, and Prime Minister joined the principals of Princess Cruise Lines on board Prince P&O Cruises. And we spent some time talking with them and also taking our medical teams through their medical facilities so that they could view what is on board the ship and what capacity the ships have. And many of our team members were fascinated because they did not realize that ships have 1,800 rooms, bigger than most of our hotels would have even, but they also have dedicated medical facilities, they have ICU beds, they have ventilators, but what is important in terms of documentary compliance, even under this legislation and under the international health regulations, Mr. President, is that they submit a wellness and health and wellness report of the status of the health on board that ship, 24 hours prior to arrival, 48 hours prior to arrival, 72 hours prior to arrival, and as long as that ship is in port, it submits a report daily on the documented health of that ship as maintained by their medical team. And those are the kinds of things that are legislated and required both for cargo and for cruise ships, Mr. President. Now, the second schedule of the bill I skipped over a little bit because it actually is the substantive body of the legislation, the original convention itself, but I would wish to draw members' attention to the actual recommendations and standards that are set. The convention goes further than just to establish the actual clauses and the provisions that are there. It lays out scenarios and it establishes standards and it tells you what the recommended practice should be in each of those scenarios, which is quite detailed and is important because it removes the subjectivity from its application. Now, Mr. President, I want to speak just only about one more thing because I think that I have covered most of what I wanted to treat to in the legislation, but I just want to be able to say that this is a significant, again, moment for Barbados because we are the first of the countries in the region, to have implemented the bill in the first place to support the maritime single window concept. Many countries in the region have already, I believe there are 3 countries in the region who have maritime single windows, but they have not adopted the accompanying legislation to support the administration of the maritime single window. Barbados has taken a companion approach where there's the legislation bringing us up to speed with the FAO Convention itself and also the implementation of the maritime single window. It is also expected, Mr. President, that in administering the maritime single window, that the other ecosystem components that I spoke about earlier, the port community system, the electronic single window, and of course, Asicuda World, will form a coherent part of the overall ecosystem of the Barbados port, who will take responsibility for the administrative management of this legislation. So, Mr. President, I think those are the main things that I would wish to raise here. And my final point would be on the question of the importance of logistics efficiencies. There is no doubt in anyone's minds here, and we've all been watching the news, we've all been seeing globally what is happening with supply chain interruptions. Everyone has seen what's happening globally. Certainly, I can say that from my own perspective, both as the minister responsible for tourism and as the chairman of the CTO, we have been speaking across the region and locally with suppliers about what is going to happen with the supply chain, and we are comfortable that we have adequate supplies both locally and regionally in order to go through the winter season, both locally and to ensure that people who are visiting our shores have adequate supplies. But it is the inefficiencies that may exist in the logistics chain that will cause challenges. We, for example, have seen in some instances, and I had a meeting this morning where this is one of the things that was discussed. That is what delayed me from coming into the chamber on time. But we have seen in some instances, for example, some products that used to take 6 to 7 weeks to arrive on island, they're now taking 12 to 14 weeks in terms of time being extended, but there's also a significant increase in cost, sometimes by 200, 300% by the time they are landed in the country. If we are dealing with those kinds of external challenges, Mr. President, over which we have no control. We don't control the global supply chain from the Far East, from Europe where it has shifted. We don't control the nearshoring from the US where many suppliers have now attempted to procure goods and bring into the region. But what we do have to take full control of, Mr. President, and what we have taken full control of, are the internal efficiencies or inefficiencies where they exist. And so once goods land in Barbados or ships are inbound to Barbados, it is in our interest to ensure that we clear those goods as quickly as possible without incurring any further delays in port, any further charges in port, any further costs therefore associated with those delays, including demurrage charges, Mr. President, which are as a result of those kinds of delays, which will then have an impact, a detrimental impact on the cost for the consumer. So we can't control what happens globally. We can't control what happens in the international supply chain, but we can mitigate the impact of further increases as a result of implementing port efficiencies and logistics chain efficiencies, such as the implementation of the maritime single window, the electronic single window, a port community system, a Secure World functioning effectively, and all of the agencies being on board and online and clearing goods in real time. And so these are some of the initiatives that this administration has undertaken in the last 3 years to ensure the kinds of efficiencies that we're seeing. We're seeing it culminating now in the clearances of ships themselves. And there is mention in the legislation, and I just want to make one reference to it before I close, about the question of energy efficiencies. This is a huge issue, Mr. President, in the shipping industry and to a lesser extent in aviation, but certainly in shipping. And what you have been seeing in the industry is a serious push to shore power, powered in initial stages by LNG, and then ultimately the expectation is that the industry will get to hydrogen power. And so there are also efficiency gains to be realized by just-in-time clearances so that you're not having ships waiting offshore, waiting for a berth, and not being able to achieve the kinds of efficiencies that are necessary. So with these few words, Mr. President, I commend this piece of legislation, this important piece of legislation, to this honorable chamber, and I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cummings. Senator Drakes.
Thank you, Mr. President. As it relates to this bill, the Convention of Facilitation of International Maritime Traffic Bill, Mr. President, sometimes when I read legislation, I try to classify them. Legislation that really does not need any kind of contentious debate. And then there are some that when you read them, you know you have to get up and you have to say something because there are concerns. But luckily, sir, this one is of the former. I do support the bill. And I look to my honorable member over on the other side, who I'm sure is smiling behind his mask. Because, sir, we know that this legislation, one, is in a long time in coming, and should have really and truly been passed already, given that the convention was adopted in 1965 and put into force in 1967. So 4 years, Mr. President. But sir, as Barbados seeks to expand and explore more economic activity in the maritime space, we have to ensure that legislation such as this is enacted to support good governance in the maritime space. And this is clearly important because, sir, what it does is, and it was rightly stated by the member who tabled and is leading debate, it's providing for an ease of doing business as it relates to port facilities and the clearance of goods, persons, when you're talking about cruise ships, the clearance of things like that. So, sir, what I would say is that I am hoping that along with this bill, there's other legislation that is going to form the architecture around what we call the blue economy going forward. I know that there is consultation happening as well as it relates to our Fisheries Management Act and trying to get a new and improved and modernized Fisheries Management Act. I'm hoping that that type of legislation is going to come to the chamber soon. And I also know that we have, at the moment, consultation and a technical study being done as it relates to our marine managed areas, which will also have implications for things like where ships berth and the like, Mr. President. So, sir, what I will say though is, and I'm going to seek clarification on this matter, is what I am going to ask now is that can the current administration seek to find out, and maybe I can get an answer once we wrap up the debate, is it that we are at a stage where our current legislative framework does not allow us to actually enforce what is outlined in our Coastal Zone Management Act as it relates to the damage of reefs? The Coastal Zone Management Act does have a fine associated with the damage of reefs, $300 per square meter. But I was told in consultation with other persons that the lack of regulations is what's stopping that enforcement from happening. And I just wanted to ask that question, sir, as we are currently talking about maritime affairs and the like. So, Mr. President, as I said, the bill is not one to cause any contentious debate, but I want to just quickly note a scenario that happened, I believe it was last week, when I got a phone call as it relates to the port. Sir, a lot of persons believe that once you stand in here, you are part of government and you can fix their grievances. You can fix their grievances. You can possibly make another phone call and try to assist them, but nonetheless, you are not in a position to make any kind of action. But sir, I received a phone call last week from someone who was really distraught. They had gone to the port to collect goods, and they arrived at the port around, I believe, after 9. Yes, after 9. And she said the treatment that she received in the port was nothing less than atrocious. And I'm not sure what has happened in the port that there is this delay that is happening. But she left the port, I believe, after 3 in the afternoon, still without her goods. I believe she had all of her paperwork. And I think what also made her upset was the fact that there was no one to give her guidance on what was happening in terms of the process that is to be done in order for her to get the goods. And sir, if we're talking about business facilitation, as was rightly said, we have to control what's happening internally. I know that one of the things that has been coming up recently is this lack of clearance or the inability for persons to get goods in a timely manner coming out to the port. And I don't know if there's some kind of systems management that's happening that's failing at the moment, or is it that people are not au fait with the new regulations or the new paperwork that needs to be had in order to get their goods cleared. But Mr. President, I am just asking for some kind of clarification on that matter, because when you get phone calls like the one that I got, it is cause for concern as it relates to what is happening at the Bridgetown Port. So, sir, I support the bill, as I said. I look forward to, I am sure, further legislation that supports the sustainable development of our maritime space, given the increase in economic activity that is expected, given we are looking for new avenues to support investment and jobs in a post-COVID environment. And Mr. President, there are clearly then some areas that need to be identified, clarified in terms of making sure that our marine resources are still protected despite our increased activity in the marine space. And also, Mr. President, if I could get any kind of response, I'm hoping any kind of response as it relates to the inefficiencies in the port. I'm sure a number of persons, not just the person who called me, but a number of persons across Barbados who are having that challenge, given that it is Christmas and we've had a long year, Mr. President. Persons just would also like to have their goods cleared so that they can have what I would hope would be a good holiday season. So, Mr. President, I support the bill and I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Drakes. Honorable Senators, allow me to welcome some guests this morning. We have the pleasure of welcoming to our chamber Her Honor Valerie Woods, who is the Speaker of the House of Representatives of Belize. Madam Speaker, welcome. And Madam Speaker is accompanied by Clarita Pitch, her Deputy Clerk of the National Assembly. Welcome. And I should say to you that Madam Speaker is also the Chairman of the Commonwealth Women Parliamentary Group or Assembly, whichever is the title. But the Women's Parliamentary aspect of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, and I would urge, first of all honourable senators to fully participate in the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, and our women parliamentarians to especially support the excellent work done by the Commonwealth Women Parliamentary Association, of which Her Honor Valerie Woods is the new chair. And Speaker, His Honor, Speaker Holder, and I will be having Speaker Woods for a working lunch downstairs when we break. So, thank you very much. Welcome. Speakers, additional speakers? No one else? Senator Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to thank the previous speaker, Senator Drakes, for her comments and respond to, I think she raised two issues actually. So to draw Senator Drakes' attention to the fact that the legislation, yes, is substantial, it is significant, it is transformational, but there are other what we call consequential amendments which are listed in the actual bill itself, and they include 3 additional items of legislation: the Harbors Regulations of 1961, the Quarantine Act, Cap 53, the Quarantine Maritime Regulations as well. Those are 3 consequential amendments, and those are covered, the consequential specific amendments are covered in the 10th schedule to the bill. Now, in terms of the question on the coral reefs, I sit on the tourism side. I would not be in a position to answer what the specifics of the Coastal Zone Management Act require, but we can solicit that question from the Coastal Zone Management Unit and its leadership. Now, on the last question which you raised on the port, I think it is sometimes easy to cite inefficiencies or sometimes lack of information. The port for the last year, if not longer, has not been allowing walk-in traffic into the port. So unless a person, I get complaints sometimes, somebody who has said, well, I got my information that my goods are ready to collect and I went to the port. But the port's website and all of its social media says you have to make appointments now to go into the port. And that's been the case for over a year. And the reason for that is because of COVID. So the port can no longer accommodate large numbers of persons traversing in and out, and they've had to have controlled traffic moving into the port in order to protect both persons who are using the facilities as well as persons who are working in the facility. And so Shed 2, for example, where people are going to collect their personal effects cargo, which is what it sounds like for you, only has a limited capacity. And so persons have been encouraged for the last year to either make an appointment where they can clear their goods directly, or to work specifically through a freight forwarder who can clear on their behalf and deliver directly to their home, or to work with a trucker who works in the port who can also clear on their behalf. So there are at least 3 different options. But if people walk into the port without an appointment, 1, they will have difficulty first entering the port, and 2, they will have difficulty clearing their goods from the port. So it's not a port inefficiency on its own. If that is what the issue is, it really is sometimes that you have to keep people safe. And in fairness to the port as well, and I think we know I'm a little partial to the port, we know this. In fairness to the port, over the last week or 2, they've actually really dealt with a number of difficult situations. They have lost 2 of their own members just last week as a result of COVID. And so their own officers are having the same difficult year that we are having and facing the same kind of challenges that we are facing and the same kinds of frustrations, and they too are looking forward, hopefully, to a brighter and a better 2021. So I'm hopeful that the websites that are there, and they have an active social media presence on Instagram in particular, where they are sharing information all the time on the procedures for clearance of goods, that people can use those mechanisms to be able to access the information on the clearances. So I hope that those questions have answered, those answers have provided some comfort to the answers for the senator who raised them. But, Mr. President, I wish to move on the basis of the absence of any further comments to have this bill read a 3rd time.
Thank you, Senator Cummins. The question is that this bill be read a 3rd time. Honorable Senators, if 2nd time, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. It's that time of day. The question is that this bill be read a 2nd time. Honorable Senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honor do now leave the chair and the Senate dissolve itself into a committee of the whole for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do not leave the chair and the Honorable Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. Honorable Senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Ready, Nigel? You ready?
Just no committee. Just announce it on committee. Just announce that we're on committee.
The Senate is now in committee.
So, Chairman, you have the permission to take the bill in parts.
In parts, no problem.
Part 1, clauses 1 to 4.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 1, clauses 1 to 4 do stand part.
The question is that Part 1, clauses 1 to 4 stand part. Honorable Senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 2, clauses 5 to 8.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 2, clauses 5 to 8 stand part.
The question is that Part 2, clauses 5 to 8 stand part. Honorable Senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 3, clauses 9 through 23.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 3, clauses 9 through 23 stand part.
The question is that Part 3,
Chair.
clauses 9 to 23.
Chair, just to quickly point out that there's an error on clause 23. It's editorial in nature, but just to bring it to the Chamber's attention. Clause 23, 1D, the sentence is incomplete. It says, was not made to violate any, and then it continues the ship owner. I assume it's supposed to be the same as 23, 2D, was not made to violate any enactment. The words that are missing for 23, 1D at the end of that sentence is any enactment, just to make sure.
There's a.
violate any, the ship owner. Yes, I have it there. The D was not made to violate any,
That's correct, Chair.
and there's no,
Any
yes, nothing after
enactment.
any.
Yes,
And then in the second part, D
that's
was,
correct, Chair.
was made to violate any enactment. We can
That-
treat that as a typo.
Yep, yes, sir.
Hmm? Come to say. Mhm. She's saying that this word here is not, is missing from here. Look. It was an advertent, okay, it was not on the was not Judas words as an. Any the word is that she did not. Wasn't enactment? This enactment should be clear. That's what she's saying.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move a suspension for 5 minutes while we clarify, because I wouldn't want to put words that I'm not 100% certain belong in there.
Have. It's omission. Yes.
So this can be treated as an omission rather than a typo, an omission. Yes. Yes.
Go ahead.
So the means that part 3, clauses 9 to 23 stand part as amended, and the amendment relates to 23(1) clause D. Go ahead, Nigel.
Omission. Error.
Nigel, go ahead. Go ahead now. We are part 3 clause D. Part 4.
Put the question then.
So the question, I put the question already, which is that part 3, clauses 9 to 23 as amended stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. Part 4.
Part 4, clauses 24 to 26.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's appropriate that correction of errors is where we found the error. I beg to move that clause 4, sections 24 through 26 stand part.
The question is that part 4, clauses 24 to 26 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 5, clauses 27 to 33.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that part 5, clauses 27 through 33 stand part.
The question is that part 5, clauses 27 to 33 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 6, clauses 34 to 36.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that part 6, clauses 34 to 36 stand part.
The question is that part 6, clauses 34 to 36 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 7, clause 37.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that Part 7, Clause 37 stand part.
The question is that Part 7, Clause 37 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 8, clauses 38 to 42.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that Part 8, Clauses 38 through 42 stand part.
The question is that Part 8, clauses 38 to 42 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
First schedule,
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that the first schedule be the schedule to the bill.
The question is that the first schedule be the first schedule to the bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
the second schedule,
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that the second schedule be the schedule to the bill. Second schedule to the bill.
The question is that the second schedule be the second schedule to the bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
the third schedule,
I beg to move that the third schedule be the third schedule to the bill.
The question is that the third schedule be the third schedule to the bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
the fourth schedule,
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the fourth schedule be the fourth schedule to the bill.
The question is that the fourth schedule be the fourth schedule to the bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
the fifth schedule,
I beg to move that the fifth schedule be the fifth schedule to the bill.
The question is that the fifth schedule be the fifth schedule to the bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
the sixth schedule,
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the sixth schedule be the sixth schedule to the bill.
The question is that the sixth schedule be the sixth schedule to the bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
seventh schedule,
I beg to move, Mr. Chairman, that the seventh schedule be the seventh schedule to the bill.
The question is that the seventh schedule be the seventh schedule to the bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
eighth schedule,
I beg to move that the eighth schedule be the schedule to the bill.
The question is that the eighth schedule be the eighth schedule to the bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those
Aye.
against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
ninth schedule,
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the ninth schedule be the ninth schedule to the bill.
The question is that the ninth schedule be the ninth schedule to the bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
10th schedule,
Finally, Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the 10th schedule be the 10th schedule to the bill.
The question is that the 10th schedule be the 10th schedule to the bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
report,
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Your Honor do not report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do not report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it. The chairman has reported to me the passing of one bill in committee. Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
Question is that this bill be read a third time. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as a facilitation of International Maritime Traffic Act 2021.
Question is that this bill do now pass and be so cited. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. The bill stands so passed and cited. Senator Walcott.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this sitting be now, this brings us to the end of government business for today, and I beg to move that the Senate do now adjourn, sine die. But while doing that, I want to alert members of the Honorable Chamber that the Chamber might have to reconvene before Wednesday. So sine die. Thank you.
Okay. The question is that the Senate will now adjourn, sine die. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. The Senate stands adjourned.